All right. Ready, Chris?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming. This is part of our professional development workshops that we're doing from most of the month of April and a little bit into May with different skills that artists can use to learn about how to transfer their practices online or general professional development skills. And today we have Christopher Paddock, who's helping to teach us a little bit about video editing and other ways to make online content. So I'm happy to turn it over to you. Oh, and of course, I'm Kat Trataris, and I manage exhibitions and programs at SFAI. And we hope to see you all for more of these workshops.
Cool. Thanks, Kat. Hi, everybody. So I think everybody in this list knows who I am. So the purpose, as Kat said, for today is to go over maybe some of the more basic things that I think we all should or hopefully do have access to that maybe we don't know how to yet fully kind of utilize for video work. I'm making a few assumptions by doing this. I'm assuming that everybody kind of has access to a cell phone. In the absence of equipment from the equipment checkout space at SFAI, we still do have access to some more limited tools, but still relatively high quality depending on what you have. So if anybody doesn't have a cell phone, maybe particularly if you don't have an iPhone, let me know in the chat and maybe we can talk about some alternatives to that. But assuming that everybody has that in the chat, and I've got a Mac, so I've got a Mac laptop. I'm also going to be showing you a few software tools on the Mac as well. So if you have Windows or if you have something else, let me know. And there are some tools for other platforms as well. And everything that I'm going to look at is free. And if you're a SFAI student, we're going to look at Adobe Premiere pretty briefly, and that's also free for now. So until the end of May, with your SFAI email address, you can log into Adobe and you can download the Creative Cloud, which is a pretty useful tool, especially as we try to finish the semester off and get content made. So just to start it off, I went out today and I took some footage of the courtyard at school. So I'm going to go ahead and share my iPhone screen, and I'm sure everybody on this has taken video with their iPhone. So I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. I've got clips here. First thing I really wanted to look at is, I'm sure, again, everybody's seen this menu, but you might not know, you can go into a clip and you can do pretty minor editing on your iPhone kind of already without any additional tools. So if you are looking at maybe documenting a piece, if that's a sculpture that's kind of three-dimensional and you want to create a clip that kind of spans that piece, or if it's a performance, something very limited, and you're just putting your camera, up against a wall or propping it up in some way, or finding a tripod, you can go ahead without any other tools and click the edit button on your iPhone up there and make very simple edits, very simple trims. So I can go ahead and move this slider here to set my in point. And I can move the slider at the end and I can set an out point. So that's a basic edit. And that's kind of the gist of what editing is in a way. You're taking raw content that contains kind of the meat of what you're looking to show. And then it's also got stuff that you want to trim out. And with the iPhone, without any additional tools, you can go ahead and do that. And I can save that and I can hit done. I can save it as a video, or I can save it as a new clip and duplicate it. So a few really basic tools that are already on the iPhone itself. If you have an iPhone, I think in the past 5 years, it will have come with Imovie. That's another free tool that you can use, and that is on mine. And so you can go ahead and download this. Generally, I think for everybody, it should be free on the Apple App Store. So in Imovie, I can create a new project. And right up at the top, it allows me to select my clips. So I can go ahead and select clips that I took today of the courtyard, and I can create a movie. And here's a pretty basic, but still useful editing tool, and I can make changes to these clips. iMovie does a little thinking for you. So by selecting all of those clips, it's brought them all in to a timeline. So it hasn't really given me any options of moving things around or or anything like that. If we want to be a little more advanced, we can do that on the Mac. And I'm going to show you how to get clips off your iPhone onto your Mac and open up Premiere and do some basic editing. But iMovie is something that I'd recommend maybe just downloading from the App Store. It's a free tool, and it's better in a lot of cases than, you know, just uploading a raw clip to YouTube or something like that. So kind of getting out of that for now, back to our gallery. I want to move these clips to the Mac. And so if you haven't used Airdrop, this is obviously a pretty useful tool. It's very quick, and it also works not just from iPhone to iPhone, but from iPhone to Mac. So in my photo album here, I've clicked my clips of the courtyard, and I can hit my share tab here, and I can hit MacBook Pro, and then now I have shared those clips to my laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to my desktop on my computer here. And in general, the clips that, or any file that gets sent through Airdrop is in your downloads folder. I did this a little earlier, and I moved all of those clips to a folder on my desktop called Courtyard. And in this Courtyard folder, I've created a folder called Footage. Depending on your experience with kind of video editing or using tools like iMovie or like Adobe Premiere, something that you're going to run into, something to really remember, is that you want to keep your content organized. You can end up with files kind of all over your computer, downloads folder, on your desktop. By kind of collating everything and bringing everything into a centralized location, that keeps everything kind of portable, keeps everything connected, and you know, prevents opening up your project and finding that half of your files have gone missing. So make sure that you keep things organized. In this case, I'm just moving everything into a folder called Footage here. And Premiere is, as I said, free for SFAI students and staff up until the end of May. So I'm going to open up Premiere on this computer here. Let's see. And so this window right here, that you may not have Premiere already, but if you want to maybe take a few notes kind of on the basics of how to create a new project in Premiere, this is the new project window. So this is what's going to come up when you open it for the first time. Up top here, it's just going to give us a little space to fill out a name. So I'm going to go ahead and put Courtyard here. It's going to give us an option of selecting where to save this project file. So under location, I'm going to go ahead and browse, and I'm going to browse for that desktop Courtyard folder. So I can go ahead and select that. The rest of this stuff is not really relevant for basic editing. This is generally for capturing you know, footage from tapes. That's what this kind of ingest section is. Things that maybe you don't really need to look at just for the basic stuff. So I'm going to hit OK, and we should be presented with our kind of main window. Let me just adjust my screen resolution here. Okay, so tell me, is this interface, I know nobody's really got their chat or their mic turned on, but this interface might be a little small. Maybe tell me if you have your mic on, if this is too small, whether or not you can read this text. Okay. So this right here, this is the kind of, quite a complicated looking interface, but this is the basic interface with Premiere, the 2020 version that you'll download now from the Adobe website. the first tab that it opens us up to is the Learning tab. So if you are kind of new, Premiere has great tutorials for free that kind of come with the software when you download it. But I'm going to go ahead and switch to this Editing tab up here. So these are the basic interface elements for Premiere if you haven't seen this before. The most important one that we want to look at first is this project window right here in the bottom left. So this is where we're going to be bringing in those clips that we shot on the iPhone. This is where everything kind of lives. So to import media, I'm going to go ahead and double click in this area. Double click, and that brings up my file browser. And this is where I'm going to select files to import. So it's automatically kind of taken us to that Courtyard folder. That's where we saved our Premiere file. So I'm going to click that. And then here inside of footage, these are all the clips that I brought in earlier from my iPhone. So I'll go ahead and select all those. I can drag, and then I can say import. So all of those clips show up here as thumbnails in Premiere. If I want to look at them individually, I can double click on them, and then they show up in this window right here. This is called the source window. So when I click on clips, I can click through them, and I can see them here, and I can go ahead and play them. I don't know if you can hear my sound, but the iPhone camera, it's got video, but it's also got sound as well, obviously. So sound will come into Premiere when we bring it in. So I can look through these clips in the browser, in the project browser here, and sort of get a feel for what I have. This section here to the right is called the timeline. So this is sort of the area where we're actually going to compose our piece. This is where we piece everything together. So if I were to bring something to this timeline right now, I could just click something on the project browser, and I can drag it in. And now this appears on a timeline, and you see it showing up here to the right in the program browser. So the program window here shows us what's on our timeline. So this source window on the left is showing us what we have selected in our project browser. And then the program window on the right is our project. This is what's in our timeline. So if I were to just kind of randomly bring in clips, bring some more down like this. This is a pretty rudimentary, but nonetheless, this is a edited project. I can bring it to the beginning, and I can hit play, and all of my transport, all my controls for playback are right here. So I can hit stop, I can hit play, and I can watch what I've taken, and I can move things around. So that's one way to do this. One way to do basic editing is to be bringing your clips to your timeline, and then within your timeline, you can use your mouse, and you can come to the edges of the clips, and you can just drag them to make them shorter. You can cut the end off, you can cut the beginning off. And that's how you kind of basically trim things around on a timeline. I think the easiest way to do it is if we were to delete all of these. If I were just to select everything and then hit my delete key, I can bring up a clip that I want to start with in my source window. And I can use my playhead. So right here is the playhead area. I can scroll to a section that I want to start with. Say I want to start right here. And then on my keyboard, I can hit I, or right here, I can say mark in. This is the in point marker. So if I hit in, that's going to basically tell Premiere that this is where I want to start my clip. And as I go, say I want to stop kind of right here, I'll go ahead and mark out. And by doing that, I can now drag my clip from that browser into my timeline. It gives me a little thing here that says the clip does not match the sequence settings. Go ahead and change your sequence to match. But by selecting my in point and my out point, I can just drag and I can drop on my timeline, and now I've got just that little selected clip in my timeline. And I just keep going, select another clip, say I next want to cut to this right here. I can go ahead and set in, say we want to go until we pull out to the grass here, and I can say out, I can drag it down. Got that cut there, and then just keep going. Cut to this tree, go ahead and say in and out, and then I'm just dragging and dropping. So if you're documenting work, if you're documenting performance, and you have multiple shots, multiple clips, this is basically how you can take those clips, only what you want, and pop them in a timeline. As I'm dragging those clips down, I'm also dragging sound with them. So if you can hear, you can kind of hear the sound is a little bit maybe disjointed. So if you did have sound as a component to what you were doing, either maybe that's a separate kind of narration or a separate piece of audio, you can bring sound in, just like we brought video into the top. You can bring sound down into this bottom section here. So if you have a song, if you have an MP3 file, or if you have maybe a voice recording that you've taken on your iPhone, all of that stuff can be brought into Premiere and placed on the timeline in this audio section, which is the space below here. Space above is video, space below here is audio. The iPhone that I shot this with is the default recording is going to be at basically full HD, and it's going to be at a frame rate of 30 frames per second. On the iPhone, you can adjust those settings. The iPhone shoots all the way up to 240 frames per second. So if you wanted to do some slow motion work, things like that, you can shoot at a high frame rate and bring those into Premiere too, and Premiere will support all sorts of frame rates. On my iPhone, I did record some audio of just the pond. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my voice recording. So if I go in here, I can go into voice memos. And if you haven't used voice memos before, this is an app that's sort of built into everybody's, if you have an iPhone, it comes with the iPhone. If you have Android has their own version of voice recording. But I recorded, and to record, it's just a simple tap of this button. This is a great kind of solution if you don't have your own audio recorder. It's not the best quality, but it's definitely better than nothing at all. So I went out and I took a bit of recording of the fountain, and I can do the same thing with the fountain sound here as I did with my video clips. I can go ahead and I can share, and I can say I want to share that to the MacBook Pro, which is my laptop. So back on my laptop here, I can go to my my downloads folder, and here is that fountain audio that got brought in. So I can take that and I can go ahead and bring it to my courtyard folder. Maybe I want to bring it into my footage folder just to keep things organized. And then in Premiere, and I'm pretty sure Premiere supports the iPhone voice recording format. Okay, so I brought it into Premiere, and just to do that one more time, I can double click in any kind of open blank space on this project browser, or I can go to File and I can go to Import, and that's going to bring up my file browser here. So here's my fountain audio that I just brought in. I can say Import, and then I can take that audio and I can just drag it down onto the timeline here. So if I want to mute the audio, if I want to get rid of the audio that was built into my clip, I can click this M here on that audio track and I can mute it. And then when I hit play, I'll just have this pond audio from below. So this was me actually walking to the pond, so I can go ahead and trim the beginning off, bring this over, trim to the end. I've just got some consistent audio that will kind of stay consistent as the video switches. Obviously not a very compelling video right here, but kind of very basic as far as editing goes. So once you have something put together in a timeline, you're going to need to kind of get this out of Premiere if you want to, if it's being submitted for a class, or if it's being submitted to SlideRoom or up to YouTube or something like that. In Premiere, the way to kind of export, the way to get this stuff out is File, Export Media. And so this is the export window for Adobe Premiere. it's got a lot of stuff, a lot of things that throw people off, but it also has some presets here that are really useful. So we've got a format selection, and we've got a preset selection. Looks like the default one right now is Adobe stock. This is Apple ProRes 422. This is the codec, so this is sort of the language of the video. The most common video codec that people are using these days, that YouTube's using, that Slide uses when it uploads, is called H.264. So if we go to our format option here, we can go down and we can find something that's called H.264. So if we click on that, that's going to be kind of the most compatible, a good balance of file size and file quality. Right here where it says output name, this is where we can go ahead and select where we want to save this to. So if I click this little section right here, it's going to go ahead and pick the courtyard. That's where we saved our project file. So we can select courtyard, and I can give it a name. And then I can say save. And then here is where I say export. So the computer is just going to go through and render that out. And then here is my file. So that's all cut up, and that's been now contained within one file that's ready for uploading to class or to Slide or wherever you need to take it. So that's Adobe Premiere. On the iMac or on Mac, I think when if you've purchased something within the past 5 years or maybe the past even 7 years, it'll come with Imovie. So Imovie is another free tool like Imovie on the iPhone. It's a little more basic than Premiere. Go ahead and create a new movie. It's got a few little kind of templates. You can create a trailer and it'll put something together automatically. I think the Lindsay's class has been using that, but if we click movie, it's got a more basic but kind of similar layout to Premiere in that it's got a timeline section, it's got a project browser section here, and it's got a program window selection here. So in iMovie, we can import media, and we want to go ahead and find our footage folder. So on the desktop here is where I saved into Courtyard and into footage. I can just go ahead and select everything and import. So just like Premiere, they show up in this little project browser here. And just like Premiere, I can kind of click and I can say I for in, and click where I want to go out, and I can say O for out, and I can drag that down to a timeline. It's the same kind of deal. I and O, and I'm just dragging that in. And it works pretty much the same way. So if you're sticking to something kind of simple and you don't want to download the entire Adobe Creative Cloud, you can use iMovie, and that's relatively basic to do. And the same goes with the audio here. I can go ahead and select an in point, select an out point, and just drag it down. If I want to maybe also trim the end of this audio off since it exceeds my clip length, I can just kind of go to the end of it and I can just drag it in, and it should kind of snap. So got a similar result here in iMovie. And iMovie, to get this out, to get this uploaded, I can go ahead and go to File, I can go to Share, and I can go to a few different presets here. It's got a YouTube preset. It's going to actually do the uploading for you if you log into your YouTube account. But what we want is basically a file. And you can see it's done a lot of things for you. It's sort of picked all of the titles and the tags, and the resolution here is 1080p, that's HD. Quality we can pick high, and then we just go ahead and say next, pick a place to save it. And then that goes through the same process. Right here in this top right is my progress indicator. And then I've got my QuickTime file. So that's kind of basically putting clips together, adding sound to clips, and kind of exporting them using iMovie and Premiere. It's sort of the most basic element of editing, which is just the cutting and the placing in a timeline. In Adobe Premiere and as well as Imovie, you do have more kind of advanced tools. You know, there's a lot of blending. You can add clips and you can blend them together, one on top of the other. You can add transitions and things like that. You can also add titles and text. So if we were looking at transitions, for example, transitions live in this Effects tab. So where I've got my Project tab here, I've also got an Effects tab. So it's filled with video effects, audio effects, and video transitions right here. So if I select transitions, the most commonly used transition is a dissolve. Well, after the cut, which is most common, but then we go dissolve. So I can go ahead and add my cross dissolve by grabbing it and by dragging it into a cut. So right here was as a cut line, and I can just drag my cross dissolve on there. I can drag another one here. And then when I play, you'll see that the clips dissolve. So there's a few different ones in here, but cross dissolve and just a flat cut are probably going to be your most common. If you want to get a little bit comedic, there's page peel, things like that, kind of 3D effects, which are a little bit corny, and I don't really see them used very often, but definitely a lot of things to explore within the Effects tab. So everything that you do in this timeline, you'll export using the File Export Media button. Does anybody have any kind of questions in excess of those just really basic techniques for editing? So Ellen says, wondering if it's possible to overlay an image or a graphic in a video, if it's possible to have multiple clips playing at once. It's definitely possible to do that. So were you hoping to have clips sort of on screen in separate sections at the same time, or overlaid in that you can like see through a clip?
I think I was interested in either of those. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Well, both are totally possible. So what we've done so far is we've just put them flat, kind of full screen. This project area is, or this program area is, this is kind of like the canvas. So if I wanted to shrink a video clip so that I could add another video clip next to it, that's all possible. I can double click a clip as it's in my timeline here, and I'm presented with a new window over here that allows me to select effect controls. So in effect controls, I've got a control called motion. So if I go to motion, I can change my scale. So if I drag this down, I'm kind of changing the scale of this little video. I can change my scale here, and I can also change my position. So my position left and right, up and down. So in order to have two clips side by side, you need to actually shuffle a clip to the side and then shuffle another clip to the other side. So this is how you do that. So say I wanted to just scale down to 50%, and I can move it kind of off to the side here, and I can get it centered. I can now bring another clip down, and I can place it just on top of that clip. So there's two rows here on the timeline. There's kind of infinite, you can go up, but by adding that clip on top, it's overlaid, and then I can double click on it. I can go here and I can scale this one down, and then I can move it to the right. Looks like I picked the exact same clip. So it's not a great example, but you see by just scaling it down and shifting it to the left, and then scaling another one down, shifting it to the right, I get this sort of overlay. Let me do that with a different clip just to illustrate it a bit better. So add a clip on top there, double click it, effect controls, and then here under motion, where I scale down, and I can, oops, and I can just move this over. So that's kind of overlaying clips next to each other. There's a lot you can do in Premiere. If you get a little more advanced, you can actually animate these kind of changes. You can animate the scale and have it kind of scale down as it goes, or you can have it move as it goes. You can animate all of those properties, which is very simple doing that. So if we're at 50% for each of these video clips, I can have 4 of those on screen at the same time. If I just want them side by side without these borders on the top and the bottom, I'm going to need to do a little bit of cropping, or I can just go ahead and scale them up, move them over, scale this up to 100%, and then move it over. So very kind of basic, but you know, relatively easy to achieve side by side, just like that. If we wanted to do 2 clips on top of each other and have them kind of blend through, I can go ahead and drag a background in, and I can grab a foreground. I'm just going to use my cutting tool, which is if I push C on my keyboard, I can trim the end off, and then back to my regular tool, I can delete that. So I've got 2 clips. Whatever's on top is going to kind of drown out whatever's on the bottom. So if I were to hide whatever's on the top with this little hiding icon right here, then I can kind of see through it. But if I wanted to make it transparent, it's the same deal. I double click it, I go to Effect Controls, and then here in Motion, right below Motion, I've got an opacity setting. So right now my opacity is at 100%. I can drag that down, and I can just blend those in. So if it's at 50, now when I play, I can see the clip below, and I can see the clip in the foreground as well. And if I wanted to animate that, let's say we want to start at 0 opacity, I'm going to push this little animation key right here. So this little stopwatch looking thing is going to animate. It sets what's called a keyframe. And if I go to my next area where say by here I want it to be at 100%, I can go ahead and drag that up to 100. And now it's going to automatically have added that sort of like an animated property. So does that make sense for opacity and side by side, Ellen?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes sense.
And do you have Premiere already?
I do. I have a school computer that I'm using,
yeah.
so it's on there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so stuff like that's all done with this effects controls on the individual clip. And to get to that, again, it's double clicking on the clip, and then effects controls, and all of that stuff is in here. And there are a few different effects, video effects in the effects tab here. You know, blurring things, distorting things. This is where you'd be doing green screen. If you had kind of a green background or really any color background, you can use what's called keying, and you can key that out. So in this case, I can probably just pick, one second. Never mind. But I could pick the color green for those leaves, and it would start to key those out and make those transparent. Can you edit images in Premiere? So yeah, I mean, still images, there are better tools, you know, to do that. But you can totally edit images. You can make slideshows and things like that, and you can edit the contrast brightness of clips as well. So just anything applied to a video, you can apply to a still image. But if we were to drag a video clip in, I can go ahead and double click it, go to my effects controls, and here in my effects tab, under video effects, we've got a color correction folder. So this has everything kind of you need for color correction. It's got brightness and contrast, so that's kind of the most basic. I can go ahead and either drag that onto the clip here, or I can drag it up here into my effects controls area. So if I drag it here, now I've got simple brightness, and I've got simple contrast controls. Yeah, so that's brightness and contrast. Kat also asks about kind of matching color across clips. Yeah, so there are kind of some built-in ways to do that in Premiere. So I can, let's say, grab a few clips, bring them in. For the most part, if you're in the same area like I was when I took these, they're going to be sort of matched already. But if I go ahead, if we want to be a little more advanced with color, we can go up here to our color tab. So if I click color, now when I click a clip, I've got all of these extra adjustments on the right. So that's this little color workspace. So say I'm in this clip here. In the color workspace, I can do things, I can do everything we just did in basic. I can adjust my contrast and my brightness. I can change my exposure. An important setting here is color temperature. So I can adjust my color temperature. I can make things cooler and I can make things warmer. I can use a white balance selector and I can select kind of my nearest white. So if you're holding up a gray card or something like that, you can use the white balance selector and drop in on white and try to set the white balance that way. The best way to match clips is to bring one clip up here into your source, and just kind of visually using your color wheels, you can be adjusting your shadows, you can be adjusting your midtones, and you can be adjusting your highlights. And so this is going to be kind of making subtle adjustments to your color here. There are a few tools as well kind of in Premiere that do automatic matching. It's not really something that I've used before as far as taking one clip and having the software automatically try to interpret it and match it. It never really works very well. I think it's getting better and better, but if you want to look into that, there is a way to kind of batch automatically match clips. But doing it manually like this, generally kind of a little better way to go. But you've got things like saturation. You can bring down your color saturation. You can change all sorts of things here, and you've got basic curves as well. So if you wanted to just add like a contrast curve, that's as simple as going into curves and doing that. And if you wanted to take these adjustments that you made, let's say for this clip, and apply them to this clip here, that's kind of, there's a few ways to do it, but it's as simple as going into Effect Controls and copying this color effect. So I can just click it, I can do my Control-C, Command-C to copy it, and then I can click on here and I can paste it. And so I've just applied that same correction to this clip here. And so that correction basically included this S curve, this contrast curve. So color tools all in Premiere, and generally in the 2020 version, all kind of housed in this little color tab here. If we wanted, did anybody want to look at like a quick text? So if we wanted to add text, there's a few ways to do that. My favorite is the kind of simple text editor, and it's called Legacy Title Generator. So we go to File, we go to New, and it's called, let's see, Legacy Title. And it's called Legacy Title because this is how it used to work. And I haven't quite fell in love with the new way of making titles, but if we click Legacy Title, we give it a name. So let's just say main. I say OK. It's going to show up here in my project browser. And this is the title window. So to add a title, I just grab my text tool, and I can just make a text box. And I can add a title. And so you've got all your kind of standard controls. Let's see, I can click this little guy here and I can move it around. If I select my text, I've got all my controls here. So I want to, let's say, change the color. So here's my fill. I can change it to black. And so the title generator is basically going to show whatever frame you have underneath. And it allows you to make the title here. And now I can drag that into my timeline. Close this out. And there's my little title. So obviously I haven't spent much time making a title, but you can easily make titles using the title generator, the legacy title generator, and bring them on. And I've just overlaid that on top of this clip. I can also overlay titles on black as well. So if I make the text white, I can bring it over and just overlay that title on black. So pretty easy to move titles around and add them in. Any other questions? Anything else we wanted to? So let's see. We've got some export settings. So exporting really in any program, it's gonna be using the same, gonna give you the same options. So Premiere is a good enough place to start. So go to File and we go to Export Media. This is our export window. This is where we go ahead and select all of those settings. So here under the top export settings menu, the format is sort of the most important part. So these are all the formats, and there's a lot of things here that have different uses in different places. So if you were, let's say, a colorist, or if you were doing video effects, you want to be working with uncompressed material, and you want to be sending it back completely uncompressed, generally as image sequence frames. So that would be something like TIFF. But for most people, just doing maybe documentation or work to be uploaded to YouTube, things like that, we're going to be using H.264. And so if we go to this format menu, we can go ahead and click on H.264. And that's going to do most of the setting up for you. You can go down here and you can match source under your basic video settings, and that ensures that your things like your width, your height, your frame rate are all set to kind of match the clips that you brought into Premiere. So there's not much these days to worry about with export settings, as long as you don't go with the default. A lot of times the default in Premiere is going to be something kind of wacky. Maybe it's not HD, or it's like very compressed. So as long as you go into format and you select something like H.264, you're pretty good. If you want something higher quality that maybe you're going to show in a classroom setting, or you're going to screen at a screening, you can go into QuickTime, and kind of the high quality standard these days is something called Apple ProRes 422. So if we select Apple ProRes 422 HQ, which stands for high quality, that's going to be less compressed. It's going to be more kind of color accurate, and also a much larger file. So that's good for maybe sending off to a screening or something to be exhibited like that. But a lot of the media players, for example, that we use at SFAI, or a lot of galleries use, they're going to be using the H.264 format. So make sure that you have that. Also, a lot of those media players are going to be using, they're going to be limited by their resolution, and they're going to be limited to full HD, which is 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels high. That's sort of the standard HD. 4K is obviously taking over as the standard, but 1920 by 1080 is still really commonly used resolution. So you want to make sure that that's set. A lot of times when these little media players kind of spit a file back out and fail to play it, it's because either you're not in H.264 for format, or you are exceeding 1920 by 1080, and that's often the max. So those are the export settings I would recommend, especially if you're uploading. If you export using H.264 and you find that the quality is a little too low, you can go down here to the bottom, and this bitrate settings section is where you're gonna basically tune how much data per second your file is gonna have. So the higher this number is here, the higher the quality is gonna be, the less compressed it's gonna be. So if I bring this up to 20, that's 20 megabytes per second. And that's gonna be basically half the compression as if it were at 10 megabytes per second. So media players will generally let you play all the way up to about 25 megabytes per second. That's limited by the speed that the media players can process. So the higher that is, the higher the quality. But if we go too high, then oftentimes the playback device is not going to be able to play. So 20, 25 is generally a good rule. And then once you have all that set, it's just the export button. Does that make sense? If anybody else have any other questions?
Any other questions from anyone about video editing? All right. Well, thank you so much, Christopher. And we will be uploading this to our YouTube channel and also to our website so that you can rewatch it if you missed something. And continue to be in communication with us if you have any questions. Christopher Paddock is here to help our students, and I'm also here to help answer any questions about our workshops.
That's right. Yep. Just get in touch if you need anything.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.